This is Tyler Stalman. I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and you're listening to the Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I am a director, producer, and owner of BC Media Productions. This is the Go Creative Show, the show dedicated to creative professionals and filmmakers. Today we speak with YouTuber, podcaster, and photographer Tyler Stalman about his transition from photography to filmmaking, the gear we all should know about, and social media tips for more successful YouTube and Instagram profiles. The Go Creative Show is supported by Rule Boston Camera, Buy Rent Create at Rule, and PostLab, stress-free collaboration for Final Cut Pro. Now, I am really excited about this episode with you guys today because, first of all, I think you're going to learn a lot because I think Tyler Stalman he's kind of one of us. You know what I mean? He's one of us here, Go Creative Show people. He's out there grinding it out. He's a photographer. He's a filmmaker. He does podcasting. He's got a YouTube page. And he's successful in all of these arenas. Like, he is an inspiration, but he's also at an attainable level. You know what I mean? It's like oftentimes we bring on guests that are working at the highest end of, Hollywood and filmmaking and all that, which is great. And you can learn a lot from their experiences. But I think it's also valuable to have people that are excelling at the level that most of us here at Go Creative Show are at, doing some commercial work and, maybe music videos, photography, and those of us that are just trying to figure out how to navigate social media and create a successful YouTube page, an Instagram page, and all of that. Certainly gear reviewing is really exciting and talking about all the new trends in kind of the prosumer/professional filmmaking market. Now, today we're going to talk about all of those things because Tyler Stalman talks about all of these things and on his website and on his podcast and on his YouTube channel. And like I said, he's also, expert at all of these things. So we can learn a lot from him. And we do learn a lot from him. And that's what we dive into pretty deep in this episode. Now, if you love this show, and I know you do, you can subscribe to it at your favorite podcast app. And that way you don't ever miss an episode. You can also check out our own social media pages, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We've got a YouTube channel that we've been putting a lot of content on as well. And you can get to all of those things at gocreativeshow.com. You'll also notice that there are some audience questions in this episode, and that's because whenever we have upcoming guests, we give our audience, you guys, an opportunity to have your question heard on the show. And the way to do that is simply follow us on social media, and we will always let you know who is coming up. So we've got a couple of great audience questions on this episode as well. So without any more delay, let's get right to it because there's a lot to cover with photographer, YouTuber, filmmaker, podcaster, Tyler Stalman. So I'm here with Tyler Stalman. He's a YouTuber, a podcaster, a gear reviewer, but most importantly, he is a creative entity and a photographer, and we're so excited to have him on the show today. Tyler, thanks for being on.
I'm very glad to be on. Thanks, Ben.
So I was introduced to you through our producer, Connor Crosby, who, he shared your YouTube videos a while ago. And I'm a big fan of people that are just really authentic and honest in their, performance, quote unquote, on YouTube. But also people that, do gear review in kind of a unique way. And I think you check all those boxes because you're not just reviewing gear to be critical. You're actually using this stuff. This is stuff that you do for a living. You are a photographer. That's how you make your living. So I think your opinion is really important and really valid for, the people in our audience and certainly mine as well.
Yeah, that was the voice I wanted to be out there. So thanks for saying that you think I'm succeeding at some level. But I found that when I was watching other reviews, which, I probably spend too much time watching and diving into the gear and, wanting to know about things I may or may not buy, a lot of it is represented by people that do a great job of diving into the details, let me know all the specs, but I really appreciate when I can hear somebody's opinion that is putting it to hard use and using it day by day. They understand what some of the more expensive stuff is valuable for. Just a great example is hearing about people talk about, theoretically how great a lens might be without having put some of them through tests and really appreciating it. okay, here's a really common example. A lot of people will love the Canon 50 millimeter 1.2. It's a very expensive lens. You've probably seen some beautiful photos from it. And so the reputation is very strong. But as somebody that used it, I had some very frustrated opinions with the previous one. And I think it takes that use in a job, something where you're delivering it to a client, to really have that full perspective of what certain pieces of gear can do. So I don't know. That's who I try to be anyway.
I think it's also a race to get your review out before anybody else. And sometimes that means you don't actually have a chance to play with it first. Yes. Like newsshooter.com has been, they've been supporting the show since the beginning. But like, I'm such a huge fan of what they do, because you get the latest information on NewsShooter, obviously. Anything that's brand new, they throw it up on there. But they take their time when they're going to do a real review about something. It doesn't come out hours after something is announced. Like, they take their time, they actually use it, and I think it just makes it so much more valuable.
Yeah, it's something I look for in any review I follow. Same goes for YouTubers. NewsShooter, of course, they do a fantastic job. They're always thorough and in depth, and they're not going to jump the gun saying something before they understand it. And same thing with YouTubers. I look to MKBHD, Marquez, and Jonathan Morrison. They both are at the very top of the game, and I think they do a great job of that too. And what that often is about to me is that there is a distinction between a preview or unboxing. Like, look, this is news. I just found out about this, and you're very clear about that is different from reviewing a product. Once you say it's a review, you need to have spent some minimum amount of time with it.
Before we go any further, I just want to introduce our audience to you, for the people that aren't, familiar with who you are. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Well, I'm going to assume the people that aren't familiar are most. My background, I'll do the quick everything I've done story. But
tell me everything you've ever done right now. Quick, go.
My background's web development in photography websites. So that's actually what I took in school. And I worked at iStock Photo right when they were kind of taking off as a web designer there. And then I licensed my photos as stock. And that was the beginning of a photography career for me. So throughout a lot of this, I was working like internally at photo companies, and afterwards also life.com, and the most recent one was Stocksy. And I was able to have a perspective of a bit of both sides of the agency licensing world and putting content out there, and then also the production side, where I'd be working either for clients or just licensing stuff of my own. I've always been a fan of having a lot, maybe too much going on at the same time. And just to be able to, as a freelancer, we want to make sure that there's a check coming in next month. So having more than one avenue for that has always been important to me. And maybe it's just also that I'm distractible and I can't stay focused. I don't know. I don't know. Depends if you want to put a positive or a negative spin on it. And then about, I guess it'd be 7 years ago now, I started working with my now wife, Anya. And she has a background modeling and in fashion. So our photography and video work started taking on more of a fashion angle. So we were shooting street style photos for a while. We do commercials for various fashion brands. And she also has a fashion blog and Instagram channel. If you want to follow that, it's Anya B. And then on my side, everything is Stalman, Stalman, which is more focused around, gear, production, how we make the things that we make.
You talked about, kind of being in various different things, and you almost attribute it to being like kind of scattered and doing too many things. I don't really see that as the case when I look at your work, because everything comes from that point of view of photography. And yes, you're doing video, you're doing podcasts, you're doing YouTube, this and that, the stock licensing. But everything is kind of based in that core, that not value, but I guess core competency of photography and image creation. And it feels like nowadays, if you are going to be a photographer, a filmmaker, there is kind of this expectation that you are kind of dabbling in all these different avenues, social media, YouTube channels, things like that. I mean, do you feel like this is now the new norm?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be, because I definitely think there is always a place for focus more than I necessarily have, and just training at one thing and becoming incredible at it. It's how, the amazing DPs that you have on the show, they spend a lifetime studying cinematography and become complete experts at it by immersing themselves in the field. So, I know a lot of people in those positions would hear what I'm describing, and that just sounds like a complete mess. Why would you do that? But I think there has become a very real place for this kind of work in everywhere other than those absolute top echelons of creation. Because
Yeah.
when you're doing things independently, you don't always have the ability to have the focus that you might want to have. You can't spend all day only looking at your lens choices and having other people move your lighting around. I'm sure you've been in those situations where you're physically carrying everything that you need to do this shoot, and you've got to understand all of the components of it.
Yep.
So a term that I've been using lately, as far as I know, I'm trying to make it a thing, is a full stack creator, which there's this idea in development that's been around forever of a full stack developer. One person that can create a whole project from beginning to end. They understand how to write the database stuff as well as the front end. They know all the different languages it takes to create a project. And I think it makes sense to define creative production in similar ways, that it is very, very, it's very, very powerful. Not necessary. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, but it's very useful to be able to have some grasp of, photo, video, audio, hopefully a little bit of design. Writing helps too. Presentation skills, like having a wide skill set has never been more powerful, especially at the average level that we're all creating. Not all, but many of us are creating. I know you, like I say, you often are talking to the people that have reached the pinnacle. But I'm sure so many people listening are, where I am. Like our video and photo clients, we work with some really incredible brands, but we're not creating their television campaigns. We're like in that healthy middle section of the market. And the more you can do, the more jobs you can do. And so I don't know, that's how I think about a healthy approach to it.
It is interesting that you mentioned presentation skills, because I think you're so right. Like that, what having a YouTube channel and putting yourself out there really is doing, I think, is getting people comfortable with presentation, which, as far as, my personal experience goes, presentation is everything. Like I am constantly trying to pitch. Yes, people do come to BC Media Productions because we are a known name in Boston. That's fine. But no matter what, I still have to pitch an idea. And there are often times when we're up against other production companies that have a much, much larger portfolio of projects with bigger clients and all this. You have to constantly be not necessarily selling, but you have to be able to explain what your vision is. And I think having presentation skills is really key. And, being able to do that in YouTube, I think, is a really valuable exercise.
Yeah, whether it's public facing or not, it's very valuable. Like a lot of the time, the best photographers or filmmakers that I've worked with, collaborated with, or had capturing me in any way are just people that are great at speaking to me and directing me and having a casual conversation or letting you know exactly what they need you to do to get the job done right now. So, generally you can refer to it as communication skills, I guess. But if you take it out into the public, it does open up so many more opportunities for you. So I think it's never been more useful and powerful to try to speak to the audience and try to get outside of the bubble of just your clients, which obviously you understand you're doing this podcast.
I want to talk about your photography work for a little bit here. And, how did it start? Like, where did your passion for photography begin?
Well, I had a good friend in college. His name is David Politti, and he was just into it. I mean, like, just was very curious and loved creating things, and it rubbed off on me. I was watching him play with film cameras and wanted to do the same thing. So while we were in classes together, we had created a lot of just for fun projects. Most of our school was about web productions, so we would kind of create the supplementary photos. Then that tied in perfectly with working at iStock, which was at the time, I think it was like the 30th employee. And if anybody doesn't, it's less of a big brand name these days since there's a lot of competition in the stock world, but it was the first site to really create the idea of microstock. So a lot of photographers hate the name iStock because they feel like it devalued the industry a bit. But I
Really?
have some thoughts on that. Yeah, I mean, so before, there's a few different stages. So at the time that iStock came in, which I don't remember when it launched, let's call it around 2004 maybe, that it really picked up steam. They were selling photos for, let's call it $1. The price changed a few times. But before that, Getty Images was licensing every image for at least $50, but typically 100, 1,000, multiple thousands. Licenses were much more controlled, and there wasn't widestream licensing at the time. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with traditional photographers or traditional stock photographers that were just saying, this is going to kill our work. We will never work again. It'll all be amateurs flooding the market. And in a lot of ways, that is the reality. Like a lot of it opened up opportunities for people like me. So like I say, I was a web designer, but I was able to become a photographer because I could actually make money licensing. But what the perspective that's lost there is that's a shift that keeps happening and does end up having a lot of very positive results as well. If you go back one generation earlier, Getty starting to license photos, period. Well, they're acquiring other companies and really doing the innovation themselves, but Getty offering these licenses was also killing traditional photography that it was all custom, right? You'd always have to show up at the job and shoot it for that specific client. There wasn't a database of stock. Stock wasn't nearly as big. And then Getty brought it online, so you didn't have to look through a physical catalog. You could call in. It's been this gradual thing of things becoming more accessible and easier to access. And I'm not just talking about stock, but creative media. And at the same time, we were faced with this incredible boom of everyone needing infinite amounts of photos and videos.
Yeah.
So the price went down, but everybody needs it. So there is, I think at this point, there is a market for everything. The market for cheap stuff is enormous, and it's hard to build a full business on top of that. But there still always is that upper end of the market that has a budget and is willing to pay for high quality work.
But I think stock photo has there's a certain type of, there's a certain style of photography that I think is best,
exactly what you mean.
that's best suited for stock. And I'm not even talking from like a quality standpoint, but I'm talking about like the reason someone would need a stock photo, at least from my experience, is I will need kind of generic scenes. Like I'll need, a nurse with a patient or, a bus driver or just whatever. Like it's sort of situational things where you're not necessarily looking for fashion. You're not necessarily looking for anything that's particularly like, artistic, because it doesn't really fit what you're trying to do. And that's my personal experience. I'm sure there's so much more out there now that things have changed. But like, how does a passion for photography, like the stuff that I'm seeing on your site, that doesn't even look slightly like stock footage, how does that tie in with, having a career in licensed images?
I mean, I guess I should give the credit to the interesting stuff to my wife, because I probably do think of things more from a stock angle. A lot of what excites me about
it's because you build
photos,
websites, so you know what kind of photos are necessary for that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I always thought of it from a very both commercial perspective of like, what do people need, and then also what technically can I do with gear. And it's really kind of lame to say it, but honestly, gear drives me sometimes. I really enjoy good gear, and it's fun to play with new toys.
I don't think that's lame to say at all. It's fun.
Yeah, and I think there's often there's definitely a counter movement to that of especially people doing very high end work would say like, don't get so distracted with the gear, and that is a good message to hear. But it's also when you pick up a new lens, sometimes that can drive you to shoot for a month and like have a bunch of really interesting new ideas. I don't necessarily I don't have to feel bad about that, I don't think. And it often is a lot of why I want to do. I mean, the reason that I have a podcast is because I like audio gear a lot, and I had to find something to do with it to justify buying a nice microphone. Like it really does sometimes come from like, I want to be able to play with these toys. So I better make something interesting. Otherwise I'm going to have to go get a real job. And yeah, nobody wants that.
No. I actually just watched one of I think it's your newest YouTube video this morning. And you said something like gear is important-ish, or it was something like that. Like gear is important, kind of, or I don't remember the exact line of text there, but I think you're 100% right. Like at first it was all about gear. Then it was this resistance to, no, it's not about gear. It's about, the talent of the photographer or cinematographer. Yes, obviously. Like the best gear in the world is not going to make someone untalented look amazing, but why shouldn't we be supporting the companies that are bringing new gear and being excited about this new gear? Because in the right hands, some of that equipment can really change the way somebody works and create some new product or new image. I mean, it's totally valuable. And yes, better gear can be better sometimes. Mm-hmm. It just can be. A better camera may be better. Like, let's not fool ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that big films aren't shot on DSLRs. Like the choices at the high end are made for a reason, not just because they want to spend more money on gear. It also has results.
But at the same time, anytime I go on vacation, I don't take anything but my phone. I don't.
Oh yeah.
The behind the scenes videos that we shoot. Yeah, the behind the scenes videos that we shoot for our productions. Phone. I don't worry about anything. Like that's the right tool for the job. And it doesn't mean it's going to give me the best images. I don't care, because that's not the point of that project that I'm making.
Well, what's been frustrating me lately is how many times the phone does end up giving me the best.
Isn't it
image.
Annoying?
And not necessarily, like never at 100%. As soon as you get it on a big monitor, if you try to set it as a background on 27 inches, you would see it start to fall apart pretty quickly if you try to edit it heavily. But so often I'll be sitting there and shooting something, especially when the client's looking over your shoulder. You take a sample photo with your phone, you're like, oh, this is what the composition's going to look like, and the sky is bright blue and all the colors are there, nothing's blown out. Then I pull out the Canon and take another photo, and everything is clipped, and like, oh, this doesn't look quite the way I thought. And it's because the processors in these phones are just so far ahead of what camera processors are able to do in terms of exposure blending. And I always get this very defensive response when I talk about this on YouTube. Photographers we've all spent money on our gear, right? We want to love our full frames and our big glass and stuff. And I think it feels threatening to some people when they see the fact that these phones are able to do some things that you just can't do with traditional cameras. And I sure hope they catch up soon. But yeah, especially holding on to dynamic range. Sky, it blows me away. Anyway.
Do you think that camera manufacturers are going to be trying to implement those types of things more and more, in 2020 and beyond?
I know that they would love to. Absolutely, they wish they could. I think there's probably some really heavy technical challenges that come along with that. Because if you think about the sensor, let's say on an iPhone, right? An iPhone 11 sensor is this tiny little Sony chip with not a lot of pixels on it. And it took until now this incredibly fast 813 processor to be able to offload and manage all that data instantly, so that you can, for example, like you can have a lot of movement in your photo, and that HDR multiple exposure thing is still able to remove all of the ghosting live. So as soon as you take the photo, you see a perfect result. And so my impression is that the state of processors is that they can only do that from a very small sensor, not a lot of data coming through. Take a full frame sensor, in many, many more pixels. I don't know if that could be offloaded and managed in the same way nearly as quickly. And not to mention that camera manufacturers just don't have access to the same processor technology as, let's say, Apple. So I think it'll be a big challenge for them to keep up. I know they want to. I hope that they do soon. Like, things have happened. Like, if you look at the way, obviously for a while now, Red has had, this is the first time I remember really seeing like HDR video, was the HDR-X, where it would be shooting multiple exposures and you'd combine them in post. And it's a similar concept to what the phone's doing, but the phone can do it all internally live. I think we're pretty far away from a bigger camera being able to do that without a bunch of post-processing.
let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that camera developers realize that no matter what they do, they're going to be behind phone manufacturers just because they just don't have the structure in place.
Yeah.
Where do you think camera technology is going to excel and stand out apart from phones?
It's going to be harder and harder. Every year I look at those numbers of the sales charts for big camera manufacturers, and some of them have really pulled ahead, but overall it's become harder. Like you see, the bottom has dropped out years ago from the point and shoot market, and the point and shoot market is going to go away. There will only be room for some specialty ones, some high end kind of luxury-ish novelty cameras, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of things the size of your phone because they're not going to be able to compete with your phone. Then at the higher end, I think obviously we're still at a point where big cameras have infinite advantages. It's why I covet the big stuff, and neither of us are actually shooting the stuff on our phones.
Yeah.
I don't think phones are going to be able to have the depth of field at any point. Optics are just going to get in the way of having especially in terms of video, any real depth of field. So we're always going to have that advantage. Honestly, I think if they can catch up with that dynamic range thing where it can just make any scene look correctly exposed, whether it is or not, that is required. If it can do that and have all of the technical improvements it currently has, I think big cameras can compete with phones again.
I almost compare it to iPad versus laptop, because for so many people, they don't need anything more than an iPad or a tablet. And I think people like us, I couldn't live without my main computer, the iMac or the MacBook Pro. But I want to use the iPad. I want to. It's more fun. It's easier. I can take it everywhere. I'm always every day kind of stretching the use of that. And I feel the same way with the phone. I'm excited by the idea of stretching how far that phone can go, almost more than using my traditional cameras in a way. It's more interesting to me, sort of limiting my tool set and seeing how far it can go.
Yeah, and I really do love that feeling. It was something I've been doing more over the last few years, is just shooting and editing on the phone and trying to get, I do it for Instagram stories often, is creating little micro vlogs where I treat it as a tiny filmmaking project that I'm just shooting for the edit as I go and trying to tell a story in an interesting way that is finished. The edit is done when I'm done shooting it. And it's not something you can do with any, an SLR or with a bigger video camera. You've always got to offload it and launch your NLE and, manage all the footage. Whereas on a phone, there are plenty of apps where you can just be shooting into the app and then you're kind of done, which I love. So I don't know, that's how I treat Instagram stories anyway, and whether or not that makes any sense to put that much effort into it. But I think it opens up opportunities like that, and the next generation that are growing up with phones now are going to approach creative production in a completely different way, I think. I couldn't even imagine having been in this position when I was a teenager and struggling to make my parents' Handycam work for stop motion animation, which it did not. The gear, accessible gear, things that regular people could have at home, was not easy to make interesting until recently. And now everybody's phone, you can really create not only something that looks very professional, but something that reaches an incredibly wide audience. There's a really great little video series, I don't know if you saw it, that Sandwich Video made, where it compares what a $1,000 video, a $10,000, and a $100,000 video, what those budgets will get you and what the production looks like. The $1,000 one is shot on an iPhone.
Wow.
And the $100,000 is shot on an Alexa. And if anybody's not familiar with Sandwich Video, they are
so great.
Wonderful. Oh yeah, they're geniuses over there. So all of them are great videos, and that's what I think makes it a great comparison for anyone to look at. Is this is what we mean when gear does and doesn't matter. It's a really clear illustration of it, because the iPhone video is still great and really enjoyable, but it doesn't look like something shot on the Alexa. So if anybody wants to check those out, that's a good representation of what I'm talking about.
Sandwich.co. I love those guys. I really want somebody from there to come on the show because
Adam Lisagor is my hero. I was just
has he been on yours?
No, but my last episode of the podcast, I was just saying how much I love him. So maybe somebody will get the word out to him that he's my hero, and then we can talk to him.
Well, look at that.
Talk to him.
It's out there in the world now. Both of us want you on our show. So if you're hearing this, come on the
Put a
show.
few hours aside.
Exactly. Yeah, they are really, really good. They sort of like created that whole, like they ushered in a completely different style of storytelling in commercial. They really did it. Like that whole, like a, God, what's the word? There's a particular style to like a startup video, or a video for a startup company is what I should be saying. That kind of like deadpan, dry, awkward kind of humor.
Yeah.
It was them. They did
totally.
it. Like they started it. That's their style. I mean, of course it's evolved, but they were the first to really do that. And they changed. I mean, when you look back at their older stuff, you realize, oh my God, the origins of so much stuff that's out there now commercially on major networks had started with sandwich video. It's pretty incredible what they've done.
Yeah. I love to see that they've also grown into something bigger and kept all of that integrity, which can be hard to do, but they've really pulled it off.
I love them. Let's take a quick break and talk about PostLab. Now, PostLab is a collaboration tool for Final Cut Pro 10. I really should say it's the collaboration tool because it really is the gold standard. It enables users to share libraries, track and save changes, and make sure that no more than one person is working on the same library simultaneously. So we're talking about zero conflicts plus a recallable history of your project. Now, PostLab is a cloud service, but it's also a desktop app, meaning you're always working off a local copy of your library. But you have the protection of the cloud and all the benefits that come with it. Now, for those of you that have tried to share libraries on other cloud services, you know that it can get a little bit wonky. But with PostLab, they have an ironclad, foolproof cloud that is made specifically for Final Cut Pro libraries. So you don't have to worry anymore. You can finally take advantage of the benefits of cloud storage. But you're not actually working off of the cloud, so you don't have to worry about the speed issues. It's the best of all worlds, and it's what you should be using if you are a Final Cut Pro 10 user like I am. Now, the great thing is, simply by being a Go Creative Show listener, you get 3 months free at gocreativeshow.com/postlab. So it's a must-have. It's a no-brainer. Get your 3 months free at gocreativeshow.com/postlab and start working with Final Cut Pro and collaborating the way you've always wanted to. And get 3 months free at gocreativeshow.com/postlab. All right, I want to talk a little bit about your transition to video from photography. I think a lot of people want to do this, but there could be some challenges. It can be sometimes more difficult than people assume. How was it for you? What inspired you to make the transition?
It's a challenge to even transition on the same day because that's something that we offer a lot of the times. It's helpful that there are two of us on set because it means we can also be each managing a different side of it. So if I'm shooting video, she'll be shooting photos, my wife. But as you are standing there holding each camera, it can be hard to make that mental switch of in a photo, everything needs to be represented in one moment. You need to tell the whole story at once. If this is about, a cook and you happen to not see what is inside of the bowl that they're preparing in the main shot, you don't have a second chance to pick it up. That was a terrible example, but you come across this all the time. You start realizing like, wait, I need to cram everything into this single frame and make it work all compositionally. Whereas in video, you have that ability to pick it up later. You have your details and you have your cutaways and even just time. Even if it was a single shot, you have time to reveal a bunch of different story elements. And in photo, it has to all be there in the frame. And so that's a context that I'm constantly trying to switch back and forth between. But
well, is the problem that you're having that you're trying to cram too much into the video, or that you don't have enough in the photo? Like what's the problem that you're having?
I mean, it's both. It's just thinking about it the right way. So it's that like if you were just shooting video and you move back to photo, you'll end up leaving out some elements because mentally you're thinking you'll be able to pick it up later, or you're projecting that the audience is going to be able to see something that isn't in frame, and then later you realize like, oh yeah, if it's not visible in that moment, they're not aware of it. And if you're just shooting photos all the time, like photographers already think this way. It's just built into the practice. You know that whatever you're showing them, that's all they're going to get. But as you move back and forth, or if you're just starting to transition from one to the other, that context, I think, can be challenging to really pick up. It's something that I see. Well, I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about filmmakers because they're listening. But when I see the photography portfolios of filmmakers, often that will be the missing element, is that I'll see a very beautiful frame. Like the photo looks fantastic, but it's a limited amount of story being told in it. It's one very specific detail. Whereas people that focus more on photography, I think, will have a bit more of a holistic, complete story in each frame, possibly. Of course, there's exceptions to this, but that's what I see as the biggest challenge to overcome between the two. But then also, there just are different technical approaches to it. What is typically considered great cinema lighting is not the same as common photography lighting. The simplest way to describe it is, a lot of the time, the formula for a great video light is to be downstage. Like, you're going to have the shape of the light coming from the reverse side of the subject so that it's creating a lot of shape. Even if it's not dramatic, you want to really emphasize that. And in photo, it's much more common to have the light coming directly from the front, especially in commercial world, but even in everything. Things are often higher key, they're brighter. You do light things differently for even the same campaign. Actually, that was just happening this week. We were shooting a jewelry campaign, and we were shooting the video, and somebody else was shooting the photos. And there are still a bunch of extra strobes on set that are lighting up the photo moments because they just need to see more than what's happening in the video.
We get a question from Jackson H Visuals on Twitter, and you kind of answered it already, but maybe there's a little extra there that you can add to this. He's saying, coming from a photography background, have you found learning and progressing to cinematography easier or harder? And then in addition to that, have there been any things to unlearn, or has it been fairly direct transfer of techniques and approach? We talked a little bit about that a minute ago, but maybe there's something else there about this unlearning idea.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the unlearning thing, is what are you going to be showing in any single moment? There's all sorts of little technical things that you have to get used to. I remember how strange it was at first for me to realize that shutter speeds were kind of locked in filmmaking. That was weird to me for years before I really understood why you can't change your shutter speed. I don't know. I think those are some of the biggest ones. Then there's also just the business side of it as well. I think it's hard to convince clients of this. A lot of our clients will see us as one or the other, which is weird for us, because we will, in the same week, we'll be hired for a similar photo job and a similar video job. And not a lot of clients understand, like, oh, well, since they do both, they could do both at the same time. And I think that also comes in terms of the genre that you're shooting in, right? If you shoot car campaigns, that's what people want you for. If you shoot jewelry commercials, that's what people want you for. And they want to see that you've done the exact thing they're going to hire you to do before. So any of that, like being multifaceted, can be a harder thing to promote because people are only aware they have one box to fit you into.
One of the things that I'm definitely not a photographer. I'll do it very, very casually. I would never sell it because I'm just not at that point with it.
Well, but I'd be really curious to hear then, what do you find as a challenge when you take a photo?
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's like, to me, when I look at photos, I'm like, why isn't this translating in a photo the way that it would on video? And I think what I sort of found is that two things. One, in video, my obsession is motivated light. Like, I want the light source to be something that would naturally be there in that environment, either through windows or through practical lights. But when you're taking a photo, it's like you don't need motivated light. You can just have a big strobe in front, and it's fine. Like, it doesn't matter. It's for some reason.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
And the other thing is that I'm relying on motion in video. And when you're relying on motion, you have a lot of tricks that you can have in the performance that constantly remind people where to look. The talent is moving, the camera is moving, objects are moving. It's easier to, I don't know if it's easier, because if you're from the photography side, it might be easy. It might be easier there if you know what you're doing. But for me, it's easier to make sure that the audience is looking at the right spot because you can use motion to be like, hey, I'm over here, look at me.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Also, in terms of how you direct people, like what you walk them through doing, you're going to suggest different things if it's for a still, because you're trying to dial in this one perfect moment, whereas what you're describing, what you're looking for in video is an overall performance, which it takes place over time. By nature, it doesn't happen at once.
Yeah. Those are the things that I'll notice. Like, because I'll take photos from like a lit set. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's lit. Right. It looks great on video. It's great. I look at the monitor. I'm like, this is awesome. I'll take a photo and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, this looks awful. Those are the two things that I'm noticing. Motivated light, obsession didn't work, and movement.
I think a lot of photographers could learn a lot from cinema. Things like that, motivated lighting, that's so often not a conversation in the photo world, which I know that sounds really weird, but the idea that you're going to have a lamp over there, but it's not necessarily casting the light. Maybe you have another light with the same color coming in, and those ideas are much less common and less important, but I think can be very valuable and can elevate photography in a way. It can give you this little shortcut into a world that all the other photographers working next to you don't understand. They're all just blasting a softbox from the very front or just barely off camera, whereas if you're coming around with some, I'd say, sophistication of what the cinema world has learned. I mean, like it is much more complicated to do cinematography, and that's, I think, part of what attracts me to it and why I wanted to do it, is that it's so hard and you really can't master it. Not that you can necessarily master photography. Of course, you can. You're always learning whatever you do, but technically, it's much easier to understand the whole picture of photography. Whereas in the cinema world, that whole picture is much bigger and harder to hold on to all those moving parts.
Can you talk to me a little bit about how you direct your talent?
Poorly.
Okay, great. Yeah. Next topic.
Yeah. Well, so actually the way that we often do that is that I'll really be focusing on the DP end. Like, I'll be focused on the camera and the lighting and what's happening there. And Anya will be the one actually doing the direction with the talent. Which is another distinction to make. I mean, because there's all these different levels of working. We're usually working direct to client. We don't typically work with an agency that is coming to us with a complete storyboard. They are much more often like a written storyboard. So it really depends on how and we're in a smaller market. Like, we're doing Canadian productions. We're not in LA or New York doing things where it's, an agency has already billed $100,000 before the project even gets to us.
Yeah.
We're taking on a lot of the creative work from beginning to end. So we won't have, like, our crews will be, sometimes just the two of us, but usually like 3 to 10 would be a big crew for us. And so that means that we're all wearing a few extra hats. I'm also running audio as well as the video. And yeah, in terms of direction, honestly, I lean on my better half to tell them what to do.
Let's take a few minutes and talk about gear. We get a question from Caleb. Oh man, I'm sorry, Caleb. Wojcik? Wojcik.
I think it's Wojcik. Wojcik. Polish last name, and my wife is Polish as well.
There you go. All right, Caleb Wojcik on Twitter wants to know, if Tyler could go back in time, what is one major investment or piece of gear that he would never have purchased?
Yeah, I saw this come across Twitter and I was like, oh, I know exactly what to say when I'm thinking about it. So when I first did this transition, 5D Mark II comes out, I'm like, finally I can start shooting video. Because video is the first thing I wanted to do. I was interested in it before photography, but it was, at the time, the early 2000s, you couldn't make videos look nearly as good as a photo. 5D comes out, it's like, great, okay, all of it looks professional. So instantly I jumped into buying a full rig. I bought a whole bunch of really great stuff from Zacuto. Some of it I still use today. I bought a monitor. I bought what was the Zacuto viewfinder that you strap to the back of a 5D?
Oh, Jesus, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
The whole kit. I bought like the LED counterweights to put on the back of a shoulder mount, and it cost quite a bit of money.
Yeah, so you were building your DSLR to be in the form factor of a traditional camera.
Exactly, yeah. And you know how I ended up shooting it most of the time? Not like that. In reality, I would kind of just have like a little cage with some kind of audio input on it. I really ended up shooting in a much more stripped down setup. So basically all of that, like buying all of the rigging that turned out not to be the way that I shoot was a pretty big waste of money. I'd say, over time, like now I shoot a little bit differently, and fortunately, a bunch of those components have just recently become very useful to me. But there can be this feeling of like, I need to get the best. But if you end up being wrong, like you did get the best, but it's not actually the category of product you needed to be buying in the first place, it can end up sitting on the shelf for quite a while. And that was also a category that moved really quickly. All of the support around a DSLR, there was only a few options when I bought it. And, I think Zacuto did and does a great job. But within 1 or 2 years, I could have spent a tenth of the money and, bought it on Amazon, and it would have been what I needed at the time. Because sometimes you just need to buy the cheap one. Like right now, when I started rigging my C200, I bought small rig stuff. And what's very helpful about that is it teaches you what you really do and don't need, because some of those pieces, I don't end up using that much. But if I had bought them from wooden cameras or, one of the good ones, I would have wasted a lot more money. So there can sort of be like, it can be helpful to practice on the cheap stuff and realize what you want before you drop the real money on something significant. Same thing can happen with lenses. I mentioned that Canon 50mm 1.2. This is the EF version, or the 85mm 1.2. I dislike those lenses, and a lot of my friends spent many thousands of dollars on them. Try these things out. Try to know if you really need them before you put the money in.
CES just ended. Was there anything announced at it that you're excited about?
I'm sorry to say no. I don't end up paying. I always find CES has a lot of the smaller things that, there's probably some detailed products that are interesting, but the big whiz bang stuff often ends up disappearing or not being released. So honestly, I get more excited about the trade conferences. I try to attend NAB when I can. Whenever there's big photo stuff announced, like it's often the things for people working in the production industries that I find more interesting. Or then, Apple stuff is announced on its own. But if you're looking for a piece of gear that I'm excited about right now, I'm actually, I've got a Mac Pro right in front of me, which is not mine. I'm just reviewing it. That'll be my next video. And I'm going to be talking about it from a production perspective. How is it useful to have this $25,000 machine for photo production or for video production, as well as the Apple Display XDR. I've been really happy with what Apple has done in the pro area right now.
Hasn't it been a great year for Apple? 2019
absolutely.
Was the year everyone's been waiting for.
Yeah, exactly.
Apple.
It really felt like we were getting abandoned. I was looking at PC laptops and switching over. I don't love Windows. Like obviously I use Macs for a reason, but I'm not I'm not religious about the platform that I choose. And I was shopping around for look, I can get these amazing NVIDIA cards in a laptop, and I could be editing on the road with a lot more power. And so I'm really glad to see I didn't have to go down that path. And I feel like I can stick with the whole Mac OS, the Apple platform, for years to come, especially with the Mac Pro. Their approach to it was the right one, even though it is very expensive.
The furthest I went was the iMac Pro. I didn't go for the Mac Pro. It looks amazing. I would love to have it. I really want the monitor. Honestly, yes. That's the thing. I'm more excited about the monitor than the computer itself. The computer's awesome, but it always felt like it was outside of our. I didn't really need it. We're able to get so much done with the iMac Pros, and I'm sort of like, I don't know if that's the best way, if that's the best use of the company money right now for that. But I do want that monitor though.
Well, I think a lot of what's exciting too is all of the great things we're seeing there, that is going to trickle down. That's why we should all be excited, even if we're like, oh, the monitor's too expensive for me. That HDR technology is going to come to something else. Like it's going to end up in IMAX at some point, even if, the XDR does 1600 nits output. But let's say the next iMac has 1,000, they will bring that stuff always trickles down. That's what happens with all these tech companies. So whatever we're seeing at that extreme high end, we will have access to it for a lower price. Maybe that even follows up with my previous lesson of spending too much on thinking I'm buying the best of the best, where I could have waited another year or two, got that same quality for half the money. So I think we will be able to do that pretty soon. If there are good reasons to buy this stuff, I think it just is like you need to look at your clients and your current projects and say, do I need this right now, or am I buying this for the future? If you need it today, go ahead and buy it. Like if you could really pay it off with the upcoming projects, it's probably worth it. But if you're thinking that it's going to bring in the new clients and they will pay for it, maybe you don't need it.
I know you're still reviewing the Mac Pro, but any initial thoughts? Like, what surprises came?
The big surprises was how hard it was to use all their resources. C200 is my A camera, so I'm shooting raw 4K, and I just can't tap into the potential of this thing. It just blasts through the footage so fast that it's way overpowered for what I'm shooting. I mean, you really need to be doing you really need to be doing 8K, multiple streams. You need something enormous to use these more spec'd out models. Now, the review unit, it's 16 cores. It's got about 200 gigs of RAM, and it's the fast one. It's got the Afterburner card in it, so the ProRes editing is fully accelerated, meaning that a lot of it's not even handed off to the GPU or CPU. If it's ProRes, it'll just all go through the Afterburner card. Crazy, crazy stuff. But, for a lot of us, if you are working at a more typical level, like just big 4K files, you don't need all that. And like an 8-core, a 12-core with a decent GPU will really chew through most of what you need. And then for photographers, none of that is necessary for anything. Even with 100 megapixel files, you can handle that on an iMac already. The advantages are more about if you need that expandable machine, if having internal storage is really important, having the flexibility of all the ports on the back, knowing you're investing in something you can upgrade into the future. That's when a Mac Pro really makes sense for a photographer. And also the XDR display being able to rotate into portrait mode, that's really nice for tethered shooting as well.
Absolutely. So you got you got the monitor too, you got the whole kit.
I did, yeah. But I think I have to send it back today, unfortunately.
So, yuck. Why are you spending your time with me then? You should be enjoying every last moment with that computer.
Well, I really would be looking at one to purchase. I'd probably get like a lower spec one and plan to upgrade, but we travel quite a lot. Like a lot of our work is on the road. So most of my editing kind of unfortunately is on my MacBook Pro, which...
Well, that got a big upgrade too. I mean, did you get the 16-inch?
No, well, so I did a review of it, and I was really excited in the review. I had some really great results, especially the big one was Resolve. When I would output the raw files, that speed increased a massive amount, a few times from my 2018 MacBook Pro. But I decided to hold off just because of exactly where my older machine is. I don't feel like it was quite, I hadn't used it enough. And even though I review this stuff, I don't like to just upgrade for the sake of it, spend money that doesn't actually need to be spent. And I think we're really hitting a faster upgrade cycle as well with all of this Pro gear. With the previous MacBook Pros, they upgraded the GPUs in a few months. They just quietly brought in the next generation of GPUs once they were available. And that's exactly how the Pro stuff should work. We shouldn't have to wait a full year for all of the components to be upgraded. I want to just be able to get, if the new Intel processors are available, put them in, and that's what I want to be able to buy tomorrow. And Apple's been doing that a lot more. So I feel like by holding off on the latest 16-inch, which was fantastic, I'm going to get something even better, probably in about 6 months, maybe it'll be a year, but I think we'll keep getting upgrades quickly.
let's take a quick break and talk about Rule Boston Camera. Rule is the place to go to purchase and rent all of your production equipment for a couple of reasons. One, they've got a world-class inventory of the best rental gear you can imagine. I'm talking cameras, audio, lighting, grip gear, communications, camera dynamics, everything you want. Everything is right there at Rule Boston Camera. They got an insane selection of lenses. I mean, think about it. They've almost been in business for about 40 years now. Well, they've been in business for almost 40 years. You see, you put the almost in the wrong spot. It's a totally different story. But they have been in business for almost 40 years. And think about how much gear you can acquire over those years. And that's why when big, huge Hollywood films come through Boston, they go to Rule. They go to Rule. Now, if it's good enough for them, then it's good enough for us. And it's certainly good enough for me. So all of that aside, we also have incredible customer service because production is important. Right? You want to make sure that you have a partner when you're getting your equipment. So you get top quality equipment. It's in great condition. It's the latest and greatest. You also get advice on how to use it and technical guidance when you take the equipment out for your shoot. So really what it is that Rule Boston Camera is committed to supporting you throughout your entire production. We're talking about peace of mind. And that's why you guys should go there right now and experience the Rule way at rule.com, RULE.com. What software are you using for editing video?
Final Cut is what I do all of the YouTube.
Good boy.
Yeah, it's what I do everything with. Yeah, no, I love Final Cut. I was at the Final Cut 10 announcement at NAB, and I fell in love with it from that presentation. Just seeing it was like, this makes sense. This is much more reasonable than what anybody else is doing. And if I've spent time with all of them. I was using Premiere for a while, and then I used Resolve to basically grade and transcode the RAW stuff, because unfortunately there's still no good RAW support for Canon RAW in Final Cut, which drives me crazy. But in terms of editing, I really love it. And then on the photo side, which I don't know if you're going to ask, but in case,
no, go ahead.
Lightroom is how I manage my photos, which I'm really considering walking away from. I know my wife doesn't want to switch.
For what?
She does all like the choosing for Capture One.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Lightroom just really is not being treated as a professional program anymore. So in the Mac Pro testing, this was a big one, is seeing that Lightroom Classic, which that's the one for pros. Lightroom CC is the web version, right? It wants to upload all your stuff. That's never going to happen when you're shooting RAW. So in Lightroom Classic, you're able to manage everything locally, but it only takes advantage of about 6 cores. So you pick up a new 12-core Mac Pro, and it's not any faster. Lightroom, I was still having the scroll wheel drag. Like it wouldn't scroll smoothly on this incredibly fast machine because Lightroom is just not being re-optimized. It's not, I don't know. I feel like they are moving towards a more mainstream audience, and that's why the version CC, like that has the optimization, but it can't do a lot of the things that we need to do as professionals. Whereas Capture One is already, that is the standard in any studio environment. If anybody's shooting tethered, it's always Capture One. I just don't know it. So it's like, well, don't want to invest the time in learning.
I've never even heard of it. I've never even heard of it.
Software.
I mean, that's how
Phase One cameras?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Do you know Phase One cameras as a brand?
No.
Oh, okay. So Phase One is they are the company that made Capture One. They're like, well, they're Hasselblad competitor. They make medium format cameras.
I'm looking at pictures now, and I thought it was a Hasselblad. Oh no, actually, no, wait, there it is. Oh. No, okay. Right. So yes and no. I'm not familiar with it by any means, but I feel like I've seen these cameras. Now, I'm wondering if maybe I just thought it was a Hasselblad and didn't realize it was a Phase One.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, all of these big, once they start getting big enough, they do kind of all look like the same boxes.
So that company is the one that created this Capture One software. Wow, I never even heard of it.
Capture One was made just for Phase One. This is my understanding. I wasn't using it then, but it was just for their cameras at the start, but it's become the standard. Basically, there's all of these tools that are crazily not available in the photo world. Again, this is another one of those crossover things. It is so painful and shocking to me every time I open up my photo editing software that, there's no such thing as waveforms. I can't see vector scopes. There's no such thing as false color. The way that hue saturation in all of the Adobe software, hue saturation stuff is completely outdated. In Lightroom, you're not able to define, let's say you want to just adjust skin tones. Of course, somewhere in an orangey pink area, and you want to select them and move them one way or the other. You only have an orange or a red or a yellow slider in Lightroom, whereas in Capture One or in Resolve, of course, you can really target in your skin tones and say, this is what skin is in this frame. And everything in that area, treat it this way, and I want to move it back and forth. There's just all these things that the video world has been doing forever. It's just part of our workflow. And for some reason, it's still missing in photos, and I don't know why.
Future predictions for 2020. I'm hearing a lot of 8K, hearing a lot of HDR, thoughts on 360, VR. Where do you think we're going this year?
8K is so boring to me. And maybe it's just the way that I deliver. I mean, like, I would be very happy to just be a little bit over. To me, there's a lot of people getting excited about 8K that don't have a use for it. I want to just see better images, like the dynamic range and the perceived sharpness improving. I want to see low light getting better. I want to see the things that impact average shooters, the people that are buying the most cameras. The top end, they already got great stuff. The Alexa LF, those images look great. They're dealt with, but I want to see Sony cameras get 10-bit S-Log. I want to see I just picked up the Canon EOS R to shoot the kind of both. It's a great hybrid camera. I like it for both stills and video. And, I would love for it to be able to do 10-bit. I would love for it to be able to do 4K uncropped. And then, in terms of stills, I think a really cool trend is seeing the 1DX Mark III offer HEIF support. So you can shoot 10-bit. If you don't know what HEIF is, it's the file format that replaced JPEGs on iPhones. That's kind of what it's best known for right now. And it's a much more compressed, that's the wrong way to phrase it. The file is much smaller, but the image quality is about equal and can be greater. And shooting 10-bit of this compressed file out of a big camera means you've got a lot more data to work with. You're going to be able to avoid things like banding if you want to process it, but you can keep that file size way down. And I think there are a lot of times that it makes sense not to shoot RAW. I don't think RAW makes sense in every situation. Just like, in the Alexa world, people shoot ProRes a lot instead of RAW because the color science is great.
Yeah.
If your Canon has great color science, shoot 10-bit HEIFs and you're golden. So I've only seen one camera offer that so far, but I really want to see that become a standard across the industry.
In our last few minutes, I want to talk about social media, your approach to it. It's a big part of your career. I mean, over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube and growing every day. 60,000 plus followers on Instagram. I mean, clearly what you're doing is working and the content's great and you're, a personality that's interesting to listen to. But I want to talk a little bit about strategy for this because like we mentioned earlier in the show, having a presence on these platforms can be really important to your career. And I think a lot of people get discouraged, myself included, when, you aren't seeing the numbers that you're hoping for. Or you're just sort of scratching your head and saying, what can I do to make a difference? What can I do to stand out on these platforms? So I want to talk to you a little bit about your approach too, and we'll start with YouTube. I guess my first question is, do you have a strategy with your YouTube channel, and how are you standing out?
I try to have a strategy. All of it is a challenge. Like the truth is that it's all hard. And even though you see success in any direction you look, we're also all trying and not meeting the goals or the objectives that we want to. Like you mentioned those numbers, which that does feel like an accomplishment for me. I'm very excited about it. But of course, I'm looking to my other friends and colleagues that are outrunning me all the time. So there's always somebody doing a better job of it. And often the truth, if you look to them for advice, is they don't always necessarily know how they got there either. There's a great quote I heard a little while ago that, giving advice about social media is the same as giving advice about how to pick lottery numbers. We all end up here, and there's certain things you can do right, or maybe even more accurately, there's certain things you can do wrong. But
like
actually finding the success is doing a good job is no guarantee that you're going to find numbers behind it. There's a lot of amazing accounts that I follow and I'm aware of that don't have the numbers they deserve. So to me, the strategy element, what has been working for me is that it's kind of lame and not necessarily applicable to everybody, but talking about the products that I know people want to know about. So for me, the iPhone has always been at the center of a lot of things that I do. iPhones and Macs are how so much gets done. So that's what I started talking about. And also cameras, actually. My first thing that took off was talking about my Canons and just realizing like, oh, there's people out there that are hungry to know about the things they're going to buy. That really worked well for me. On YouTube, it's all about being searchable. The title of the video being something that people want to know about. If you try to go the personality route, which I think a lot of people think that's the right answer because it's worked, right? If you look at Casey Neistat or David Dobrik, you see vloggers and people that are, very like loud and fun and obnoxious and, that's how they grab attention. But that works so rarely. It's really hard to guarantee that you just happen to have the personality everybody's going to latch onto. So what I've found to be a little more reliable is offering answers to things people are looking for solutions to. And it doesn't have to be, I'm talking about gear. That is just what I happen to be interested in. If you are an accountant and you are giving people the answers to their accounting questions, you can become their guru and their guide and their go-to trusted resource for it. And a lot of that's just about knowing what does everybody want to know. And if I have an answer to that, how can I provide it to them and get it out there?
But I think you're also really smart about the titles of your videos, the thumbnails. Like I very quickly know what the video is about. It takes no time to figure it out because it's right there. And if you, when I'm even just looking through your channel, you still have a good way of making sure that the thumbnail and the content is front and center. And as obvious as that may sound, a lot of people don't do it.
It is so hard. That is the hardest part. The truth, the painful truth on YouTube is all that matters in terms of views is the title and the thumbnail. People don't know what the video is until after they clicked it. So no matter how good your video is, if they don't click it, your video dies, which it absolutely happens to me. Like I've had some videos that do great, but plenty of them don't get seen a lot. And it's mostly about like, did this seem exciting enough to enough people? After they've started watching it, it does matter. It really matters how long they watch. If they start the video and stop, that will also kill your video. But if they never even click it in the first place, that's, you have to just keep jumping over these hurdles to try to get a video to have any success. You have to keep having people continue to pay attention. And if you don't, then unfortunately it doesn't travel very far. And then it can be even more challenging on other social networks as well. Instagram, most of my growth came because of YouTube. I don't have any advice about how to grow other than do a great job, run a great channel, create a great product that people want to be a part of. But it's harder to get the word out there because people aren't searching it as much. Same thing goes for podcasts. You might run into this as well, but for mine, the only way I've been able to grow it is by constantly every video telling people, go subscribe to the podcast. Because if I don't, they're not going to find it through searches. People aren't. It's like so the only answer, with the podcast is like word of mouth. It has to be a good show. And, that's why people listen. That's how I find your shows, because people talk about it because it's good and there's quality there. But you can't force that. You can't create it. You can just do something, put it out in the world that you think is going to be interesting, and hopefully other people agree.
What are mistakes people make? Common mistakes?
I think pushing too hard. So that's a YouTube one. Common mistake I'll see is there's very common advice to make sure to encourage your audience to like and subscribe and to follow you on all your social media platforms. And, if you like this content, then leave a comment below, or what do you think? And so often people just do that at the front of a video. Like you just started watching and you're watching 40 seconds of, can you please do me a favor? Like I know you've never heard of me before. You haven't watched this video yet, but can you do a few actions for me so I can harass you in the future? Like, no, nobody wants that. Like it's the same as when you arrive at a site and the first thing you get is a pop-up asking to answer a survey. Like the audience doesn't owe you anything. you owe them, if you want them to follow you along for the ride. So I think asking something before you've given it, the only way that you're going to be able to hold on to any audience is if you're giving them a reason to come back every day. Time is the most precious resource we have. And if you're asking somebody to give it to you, you better deliver. This is even why I think it's worth editing Instagram stories and spending some time thinking about making them good, is even though that is a really brief encounter, a lot of people take that as an excuse for Instagram stories to be crap. I mean, just to be, the worst photos of their messy coffee. And if I don't want to waste my life looking at bad photos or bad videos or anything. So if other people treat your time as valuable, I think you feel it, and you know that they want you to enjoy that time of interaction together. So anywhere that you're posting, appreciate your audience, respect them by making it all worth their while, and don't waste their time, I guess. Hopefully I didn't just do that, waste your time by rambling.
Well, I mean, it's clear, I think YouTube, Instagram are great for filmmakers, creative people to have profiles there. But then you're talking about Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat, and all these other things, TikTok now. Do you think, or maybe it's not even that, do you have any advice for how to increase efficiency? Because you can spend all day posting on these things. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'm even finding it with myself on set, having to carve out time to make sure that I'm doing Instagram stories of
Right.
the job that I'm actually doing, that someone's paying me to do. And I'm like, this is kind of crazy. But
it is crazy, yeah.
And you do feel overwhelmed by all of this. How do you help with that? Is it a matter of just cutting down which ones you use, or are there tools that can increase efficiency?
I don't have any shortcuts for it. I use them all. I just don't feel really pressured to use them a certain amount. So even though, if you open up my Instagram page, there'll be a bunch of photos, but I didn't post something every day. Even stories, I'm not on there every day. Sometimes I don't tweet for a month, but then sometimes I, make up for it all in 24 hours. I try to treat it as much as possible that like I'm posting when I have something to say. And I'm always just looking around for like what actually is interesting. Like what around me is something that I would want to know about if I were on the other side of my feed. I mean, a little, I don't know. I don't know if I have like the exact right advice for that, but a thought that came to me was in terms of Twitter. I think Twitter's really underappreciated, and honestly has been the path to me having the best encounters. Like, with this show, we started talking because of Twitter. Fantastic experience for anybody that hasn't written into your show to ask questions. I asked a question on a recent episode of Steve Yedlin, who is an absolute hero of mine. Like his writing about color science blows my mind, and I like study every detail of it. And being able to have any connection to him to write in and say, like, I want to ask you something, and then you get a response like that. That only really happens in Twitter, or it happens in a way that I find it doesn't anywhere else. So a lot of people I know, especially casual users, will be like, I don't get Twitter. It's a lot of work and doesn't go anywhere. But I really feel like it's worth spending some time there. And it's not going to be about, to me, it's not about finding a huge audience of people that are necessarily going to buy your product or something or give you likes. It's more about creating real direct connections to other people, especially inside of your industry.
Well, that is sound advice. Although I was hoping you'd say, you know what, there's this really great app that you can buy that just puts everything correctly on every platform.
I wish.
I know, right? Oh, you know what? I do have one more question. You were saying that you were editing your stories, Instagram stories. Is there an app that you're using to do that, or are you just throwing it into Final Cut?
Yeah, I can absolutely recommend one there. So sometimes I go into Final Cut if it's getting really involved, but my quick shoot to edit one is called Spark Camera. And they've been around for quite a while and have continued to update a lot. They rewrote the app completely recently, but you just press and hold to record, and then you let go, and then you press and hold again. So that's how that shoot to edit thing works, so that, like literally as your finger is on the screen, that's when it's recording. So you really know exactly what it is. And then afterwards, you can tweak the edit a little bit. So it really allows that instant creativity and that ability to be done the edit when you're done the shoot.
I'm looking at this right now. So this will allow you to stop and start your recording for an Instagram story all within one 15-second period. So it's not like creating separate clips, one story at a time. You can create one full 15-second story from it.
Exactly. And I hate to promote my own stuff, but I do have a video about it, which can explain it better than
Well, that's the whole point of being on the show is to promote yourself. Come on.
Yeah. So yeah, go to YouTube and click on that. But yeah, the idea, so on Instagram now, you can actually post up to a 60-second video and it will cut that into 15 seconds. So, Spark Camera, it's not an Instagram story app. It's just a filmmaking app. Like it existed before stories did.
Okay.
And so you could also I think it's a great way to do home videos as well. Which again, that's another thing. Like home videos are great. If they're too long, nobody watches them. Respect your family's time by editing them a little, making them entertaining. And apps like this are a great way to do it. There's another one, just if you want another recommendation, Video Leap, which is a bit more of a traditional NLE on the phone. I will use that one instead sometimes because I can do slightly more complicated edits, but it's still straightforward. So yeah, I treat it like creating any other video, but then I post it to Instagram stories.
There was an app that was recommended to me from someone that does like social media campaigns. It's called Over. Have you heard of it?
Right. So it's like a design app.
It's a design app. So yeah, it helps you make, I guess, better looking stories. I think you can put video in there. I haven't really played with it much. I just downloaded it and you really have to get the paid version to get all the templates, but there's a few free ones that you could play with.
It's like that with everything these days.
Yeah, it seems cool. It seems like, promising.
For sure. There's two like that I really like as well. I'll throw in Unfold and Made.
Unfold I've heard of, yeah.
Yeah, Unfold I really like. That's the one I use probably most often for that kind of thing.
Oh, all right. Well, cool. A couple little... See, now there's the benefit of staying all the way through to the end of the show. You get these little tips at the end. So
yeah,
how about that?
The best for last.
Exactly. Well, Tyler, thank you so much. First of all, your work is great. And I know it's you and your wife, and credit where credit's due. I mean, both you and Anya do really amazing work. But just browsing through your site as we're talking, I mean, your portrait and lifestyle stuff, I love the fashion and beauty stuff. I mean, it's just really, really good. So, people should be certainly following you on YouTube and learning from you and your experiences, but just go to the site, Stalman.com, Stalman.com, and just enjoy the work. There's really great work here. And we're so happy to have you on to talk about your experiences.
Thanks so much, Ben. I mean, I do know I need to update that site because that is mostly pretty old work, but yeah, that is the thing that happens with social media. It's so much easier to post an Instagram photo or whatever. But I'd also suggest, I think a great place to go is StalmanPodcast.com because my podcast gets updated pretty much every week and it'll be a little more fresh than the website will.
Absolutely. StalmanPodcast.com. You guys should check it out. If you liked this conversation, you definitely would like his show. So go and subscribe and take a listen to it. He talks about all this sort of geeky stuff that we do here, even more so, because we do a lot of just like cinematography focus, but you're kind of all over the place with your gear reviews and talking about different things and deep dives into stuff that we don't get to. So for all that kind of, well, it's good. For all that conversation, it's there at StalmanPodcast.com. Anything else you want to promote before we part ways here?
I don't know. I feel like I've promoted enough. Just listen to this whole episode again and then go to every single link that we talked about and you'll be fine.
I love that. Well, thanks so much for being on. That was a really fun discussion. And let's do it again. Have me on your show. Now it's time for me to promote.
Thanks, Ben. Let's do it. Yeah, let's trade spots.
I'd love it. All right. I want to thank Tyler Stalman for coming on the show and sharing his experiences. I mean, what an inspiration this guy is. He's one of us that has skyrocketed to, an influential personality in our filmmaking community. I think that's really important. And we're so glad that he's out there doing his thing. And please follow him on all of his channels. He's got great content that I know you guys are going to love. I also want you to check out Connor Crosby, who is our producer, and he makes the show happen. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And then our very own Matt Russell. He's been there since the beginning with me. I just want to squeeze his cheeks right now. Very own Matt Russell. He's adorable. And he also makes the show sound so good You can find him at gainstructure.com, gainstructure.com. In fact, I actually use him for all of my BC Media Productions audio mixes too. So he does the podcast. He does a whole bunch of, mix to pix work. He does his own stuff. The guy's a madman. You can hire him for yourself. Of course, I want to thank our sponsors, Host Lab and Rule Boston Camera. They've been great supporters of the show, and we want you to check them out as well. But certainly want you to go to gocreativeshow.com. Follow us on all of our social media, subscribe to the show, sign up for our mailing list. There's so much that you can do there, and we'd love to get your feedback. What do you think of the show? Do you have any guest suggestions? We'd love to hear from you, and the way to find us is go to gocreativeshow.com, and all of our links are there. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.